The unusual conventions of engineering economy or any economic analysis, this is what you're going to discuss in this video. If you are a science background student, science or engineering background student, you might be familiar with the convention that the x-axis is for the independent variable, while the y-axis is used for the dependent variable. You have already seen that the price is actually plotted along the y-axis and demand is plotted along the x-axis. The price P. The problem with that is that price is independent. It is set by the producer or manufacturer. Demand is the response to what the price is. So demand is the consumer response, which is the dependent variable. So easy to remember, demand dependent. However, it is plotted along the x-axis, not the y-axis. You have also seen the linear functions and other price functions. Generally, if you increase the price, the demand will go down. So the relationship, if you look at this graph like this, is a kind of declining function like that. So if you purely look at these graphs and translate that to equation or function, it's going to look like simply y is equal to function of x, which is the demand. P is the y, and then demand is the x. So y equals function is of demand, p is equal to function of demand. That's how, if you translate this relationship into a mathematical equation. And the problem with that's not the reality. Price is not a function of demand. The reality is demand is a function of price. That's the reality. So what should you do? If you translate these lines or graphs into some kind of mathematical equation, it becomes price is equal to function of demand, which we have used in this video series and the Open Educator textbook. However, because the reality is the demand is the function of price, in many economic analysis and textbook uses this functional relationship, and both are used in textbooks. And in our video series, we have used this. However, we need to recognize that demand is dependent variable plotted along x-axis, and then price is independent variable plotted along y-axis. And if you translate that to an equation, then it becomes something like price is equal to function of demand. If you just look at those graphs and translate that to equation, like this graph translate into equation. However, if you simply translate the reality into the function, so you can say simply demand is a function of price, like that. And both are used, so not a big deal. So when we explain the future videos on revenue, profit, cost, all of that, we'll be using this function, which is fine. Once you understand the concept, you can also use the other relationship and basically follow the same procedure to develop that profit, revenue, anything that you need to calculate.